About to leave, already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be, life with no distractions. We'll get away, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free with me. Let's go, let's be free with Not looking back, eyes on the freeway, Bonnie and Clyde, a classic cliche. We're on the run, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free.
Hi there, good afternoon, and welcome to our latest live stream, politics live stream, which this afternoon we are going to be focusing on pressure groups, and particularly the issue of whether pressure groups are good for democracy, whether they enhance democracy or otherwise. Which is the sort of debate which we could, based on the advanced information that we've seen about the summer's exams, we could get a question along these lines or something on this sort of topic. So that's why we've picked it to focus on today. I'm joined as ever by Kira. How are you doing, Kira?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Yes. So I hope everyone's enjoyed their half term. We had, obviously, you may have been off last week or the week before, depending on, different schools had different half terms, but I'm sure we're all back and well on it now, and I think we'll get cracking straight away, shall we, with the first activity, which is over to Kira for an activity called the Application Gallery. Okay, here we go.
Cool, thank you. So what's going to happen is you're going to see some images of pressure groups and some of their kind of tactics that they've used. So what I want you to do is, as you look at the image, I want you to see if you can identify something like the pressure group that's represented in the image. And would you be able to tell me something about their tactics or their aims or anything you know about the pressure group in general? So let's look at this first one then. Okay, so looking at this image, it's actually it's not that specific as an image, but if you can write down as the music's playing any ideas. What is the pressure group? What they contain?
I do like this tune.
Yeah, it's actually quite good.
It's a good job because we hear it a few times, don't we? But it's So what sort of thing are they doing on this picture? Do we recognise which specific campaign it is?
Or even the name of the pressure group? Who was it?
Yeah, that'd be good, wouldn't it? Do type it into the live chat window if you've got any ideas. So
James, protest, definitely. What's the type of protest that they're doing, maybe? So do you recognise where that is, for example? What they're causing a nuisance.
right.
Okay.
Is it an effective form of protest as well? There's all sorts to potentially muse on here, isn't there?
Yeah, it's an important thing to consider because for a pressure group to be successful, it can actually be quite beneficial if the public side with them. And this pressure group has actually maybe been a bit controversial with some of their protest strategies. For example, it is direct action, fantastic, and we can see they're doing yoga, so it's pretty non-violent, I'd say, if you're doing yoga.
Yeah,
But
definitely peaceful
they're
protest.
definitely, yeah. So they're blocking a specific bridge in London. So they're blocking Westminster Bridge because they're trying to make an argument about cars and the impact that cars have on the environment. So any guesses for the name of this pressure group? It was pretty vague of an image. I thought any other image might be a bit too obvious.
Because I wondered when I first saw it whether it might have been the Insulate Britain protest, but it isn't, is it? It's a little before that, but it's a similar sort of. Oh, I think we might have a
We got
correct answer coming through.
Correct answer, yeah. So Extinction Rebellion, fantastic, right? So it's not Insulate, no. Although they do similar tactics, but I'd say that this one was maybe a bit better than blocking a motorway. That was a little bit of a different kind of more controversial one. So I think this type of protest actually did get a lot of public support, and it definitely put Extinction Rebellion kind of on people's radars. It was the one when they tried to stop the tube where it was a bit more controversial because kind of people who are less affluent use the tube, and it's actually quite an efficient way of transport because you can carry a lot of people, so it's better for carbon emissions. So this is when they blocked Westminster Bridge because they were trying to demand that the government accept that there is a climate emergency. So it's one of their three aims. So climate emergency, reduce greenhouse emissions, and create like a citizens' assembly on climate justice. So they've been reasonably successful when you think about the fact that sort of local governments, local councils, and Labour have accepted the climate emergency. But in terms of real government change, not quite happened there. So maybe annoying people by stopping their commute to work's not a good move. I don't know. It's up for debate, I think. Okay, so this next one, see if you can guess the name of it, and maybe you can say something about their aims. Have they been successful in those aims? So think about the tactics too. Any ideas you have, put in the chat. Excellent. So Megan's put down a couple of ideas there. It's really good. Excellent. I think idea. I think I said that wrong, but yeah, that's correct as well. Good ideas. Okay, perfect. So you're right. So the correct answer is the Black Lives Matter protest movement. So it is a social movement. So it's got kind of like Extinction Rebellion, quite a loose membership. It's not quite as organized and structured as something like the National Farmers Union. So anybody can kind of join and take part. And we see, yeah, they've become internationally known, definitely become a global conversation after the murder of George Floyd in 2020. And yeah, so we can see one of the tactics here is protest. And we saw in 2020 it did create, at least in Britain, a national conversation about race and institutionalized racism in the UK, which is one of their aims. Obviously, the race report that came out was quite disappointing in terms of what they were trying to achieve. And as Adia said, so they talked about things like about public spaces and who are we commemorating in these public spaces. So someone like Colston is extremely controversial. So they kind of made that debate more kind of urgent by taking action on it when the debate had been going on without much change since even the 1970s. So really good answers there. So should we see what the next one is then?
Yeah, sure. Just agreeing, just confirming that was what it was. Okay. Well,
Yeah. So
couple of ones to look at here. Yeah.
yes, there's two pressure groups in these ones. So let's see if we can identify both pressure groups and what are their tactics that they use. Of course, you see that Rashford, but does anybody know the name of the pressure group that he contributed to? Excellent, Andrew. Okay, yeah, some great answers. So Andrew's put there, brilliant. You actually remember the name of it, which I think I actually might have spelled wrong on the PowerPoint. Apologies. But Andrew has spelt it right. So yeah, Marcus Rashford worked with Fair Share to provide free school meals. So we saw Josh is confirming that as well. Essentially, with the pandemic, we saw millions of children were going hungry, not having access to free school meals at school. That important, at least one hot meal a day. So Fair Share was great. They managed to feed about 21 million families, children and families, sorry, as a result of this. And we saw when the government tried to take away food vouchers from families in the summer of 2020, Fair Share was incredibly effective in achieving that. But it was the fact that they had the celebrity kind of pull from Marcus Rashford that definitely propelled that to become a major conversation across the UK and force the government to effectively U-turn. So really strong work from a pressure group there, and just a perfect example of how a factor like the use of celebrity can actually help to the cause of a pressure group. And excellent. So Adia has said about the bill to stop protests, attack on freedom of speech. So excellent. So we can see here the second image is of the kill the bill protest movement. So Fair Share is probably an example of a more formal pressure group where you join, you can donate and support and volunteer, whereas Kill the Bill is another social movement. It's in response to the policing bill, or the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts bill, which is trying to curtail and reduce the right to protest if it's too loud, sort of thing. So excellent. So this one is about using protests in order to pressure government, or actually more so MPs, to try to reject the bill, which has already reached the second reading and has been kind of not necessarily rejected, but heavy suggestions and amendments have been put forward by the House of Lords in January. So at the moment, it's up to the government if they want to revise the bill. But after that, it will go to a vote in Parliament again. Okay, so Josh asked a good question. Is Fair Share a charity or a pressure group? So the thing with pressure groups is their definition is actually quite vague. So a pressure group is a group which tries to exert pressure on the government to make some sort of change in society. So part of Fair Share is, of course, a charity organization which looks to kind of help people volunteer in order to try and feed families, trying to raise money and raise awareness of things like child hunger. But raising awareness is also a criteria for a pressure group, as well as the fact that they are exerting pressure on the government. So
Yeah.
Marcus Rashford, his hashtag Make the U-Turn campaign is an example of pressure group action because it was directly targeting the government. So that's a really good question,
Yeah.
Josh.
And if you think about some of the best known charities in the UK, like NSPCC or RSPCA or whatever, they are also pressure groups, aren't they? I mean, as well as raising money to, to do the work that they do also seek to influence policy, and that's, at whatever level, that is what a pressure group does. Yeah.
And even things like this part of the spec as well talks about pressure group and other influencers too. So there's of course think tanks and lobbyists. They might
Yeah.
not be quite the same as a pressure group, but they do aim to pressure governments. They kind of fit within that category too.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, just before we get on to kind of the debate, if you like, about how democratic pressure groups are and whether they're good for democracy or bad for democracy, just a little bit more on the kind of AO1, the knowledge. Most of the groups we've looked at so far have been the more kind of protest type movements. Some of the ones that are going to come up in this next activity might be some of the more sort of formally organised type ones, not all of them necessarily. You're going to see some groups, but we've messed about with the vowels. So can you identify what they are? And can you tell me something interesting about them as well? Because you're all very good in the chat window. It'd be great to see some key facts about them as well as just identifying what they are. I will have a go at pronouncing them with the silly vowel switches just for your amusement, but apologies in advance for them. Okay. Natawnal a noun of students. Stadents? I don't know how you'd pronounce that. Anyway, Natawnal a noun of students. Any idea what group that is? Can you tell me anything about them? So you just need to switch the vowels. The vowels have been altered. So all the consonants are right, but the vowels have been altered to make them say a different word. Yeah, well done, Megan. It is the National Union of Students. Can anyone tell me anything interesting about the National Union of Students? We'll carry on with the other ones as we go through, but if people want to come in with a key fact, something interesting, something they've done, type of group they are, whatever you want to throw at me, that'd be good.
Student discount.
Can get student discounts, that's true. Okay, so you were right, it was the National Union of Students. Well done. This one's in the news at the moment, that probably helps, or being controversial at the moment actually. Stapthwia Keolotone.
Josh just mentioned the NUS is a sectional pressure group.
Yeah, okay, yeah, so it's sectional or interest group, absolutely, representing its members who are students. Yep, absolutely. And well done, this is the Stop the War Coalition. So more like the sorts of movements we were seeing more in the first activity, a broader kind of some ways less organised, less group with broadly anti-war, but obviously at the moment there's some interesting debates about how they've responded to what's happening in Ukraine, and that's quite an interesting one to have a look at actually. But we won't go down that rabbit hole right now, but it's an interesting area to consider. Okay, so well done, Stop the War Coalition. Brutush Madukul Asukutun. There are a lot of U's there. I don't know why why we've ended up with quite so many U's in that one, but anyway, Brutush Madukul
Elvish.
Asukutun. It does sound very Lord of the Rings, doesn't it? And well done, New Trilogy Analysis Project, and Megan. It is the British Medical Association. So we had earlier on, we were told that the National Union of Students was a sectional or interest group. Obviously British Medical Association is too, or Megan's told us how many members it's got. Okay,
Amazing.
Brilliant. So who are those members? What do they do? You can tell us a bit of that in the chat window if you like. I'll keep an eye on your conversation as we go on, but we will keep moving. Force Augunst Sawogu. Josh said they work on behalf of medical. This is the British Medical Association. Work on behalf of medical professionals in the UK. Okay, yeah, absolutely. They're an insider group. I think that's a good thing to think about. When you say they have a presence in Parliament, do you want to expand on that a little bit? What do you mean by that? Do you mean just in the terms of they're an insider group, or do you mean that perhaps because uh, there are some doctors who are also MPs, aren't there? Whether you mean in that, and also in the House of Lords, whether you mean in that sense. I'm intrigued. So if you want to expand on that a little bit, do so. But they are like an insider group, although there've been occasions like the junior doctors strike where they've taken a role that was more like that of an outsider group. Anyone got this one yet? Surfors Augunst Sawogo. You will have heard of it when it comes up. They're an example often used for a group that works at EU level, but actually been in the news more recently because of issues to do with water quality. If that helps. Quite a good example if you don't know is Surfers Against Sewage. So they're one to have a look into. Again, have had some big successes in terms of beaches in Europe, including in the UK. But there's also the issue of kind of raw sewage being released into rivers, etc., which they've also been talking about more recently. This one looks really weird. It's weird. you will know it when you see it, but I'm not even sure I can try and pronounce it. Tixpios Aloinko. It's not as weird as it looks. It looks like something from kind of a ancient mythology or something, doesn't it? Or you might see carved on the side of a Roman ruin or something. So well done, Eve, before with the last one, Surfers Against Sewage, absolutely. Yeah, well done, Dennis, the Taxpayers Alliance. And they're an interesting one because, you'll sometimes hear people wondering aloud if they're a sectional group, an interest group, in that they represent taxpayers, but kind of everyone's a taxpayer. So do they represent the interests of all taxpayers? I mean, they're actually quite, they're a politically sort of right of centre group that essentially campaign for reduced public spending. So that's not necessarily, so it's more of a campaign group, isn't it? Yeah, it's sort of a cause group, but it's an interesting one to consider. One of these ones that make those typologies not always perfect to use. But well done, it was the Taxpayers Alliance. I'm going to hand back to Kira now for an activity called the Evalu Wheel, where we get into the meat of this debate now.
Yeah, okay. So essentially, obviously, for a good politics essay, you need to have AO3 running through the entire answer, which essentially is judgment. So are you able to consider both sides and come to an overall judgment? So we're going to think about essentially both sides of an argument for this activity. So the argument that's going to be put forward is that pressure groups can exert substantial influence on government policies, and I should have put something about enhances democracy as it can lead to expertise. So then we're kind of putting across more of an argument there. Yeah. So we're going to see on the value wheel, what is it we have to do with this argument? Are we kind of countering on it? Are we exploring it further? Let's see what the option is. Okay, so the option is depends on. So what are the kind of variables? So the things that kind of mean it can go either way. So pressure groups can exert substantial influence on government policies if they have what kind of thing. So just put down in the chat, when can pressure groups exert influence on government decisions?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because of course, if pressure groups don't exert much influence, then they probably neither enhance or undermine democracy. they're just there. But obviously, it might be that some pressure groups are able to influence government policy more than others, and that gets us very much into this debate, doesn't it? And Joss has come in there.
Yeah, so even if they're meeting up, that's part of civil society, right? Which is part of democracy. So I guess in some ways. So yeah. Josh said perfect. So it depends on funding and public popularity of pressure groups. That's very true. So obviously, the more kind of members a pressure group has, the more funding it can have as well, which means that it can kind of be more effective. So thinking about things like campaigns, having a constant set of staff as well is quite important. Like 38 Degrees has a solid staff. Being an insider group is more powerful, fantastic. Because if you're inside the room, you can influence policies. If you're outside the room, you can still do that, like we saw with Extinction Rebellion influencing local government policies, but not necessarily as effective on the national government. Fantastic. So things like celebrity endorsement, as Andrew said. So the new trilogy analysis project. So it depends on how compatible with government policies and ideologies. Exactly. So if we're thinking perfect example, Extinction Rebellion, it is expensive to deal with climate change. Obviously, it is should be a priority, but it's expensive. It doesn't win you votes if you're going to say things are going to cost more money. So essentially, that does go against the government's agenda. So, like Duncan mentioned earlier, with the BMA, they're an insider group when they're talking about public health issues like smoking in cars. So then they have the support of the population and they have the support of the government. But when they're talking about issues to do with junior doctors and their working hours, that's when the government kind of more or less abandoned them. They became outsider on that issue. So they have to be in line anyway. Expertise would influence it if they have highly recognized academics. Perfect. So things like think tanks, for example. So with the current Conservative government, the Centre for Social Justice is very strongly linked to the Conservative Party, with Ian Duncan Smith being the chair of it, for example. So that they have more influence on the government. Is that good or bad for democracy? Depends, I guess. Popularity public, perfect. Megan said relationship with the media, also important. If you have a positive relationship with the media, they will kind of present you in a more positive light. So Fair Share and Marcus Rashford were presented very positively across all media outlets. And maybe that was a crucial factor in forcing the government to U-turn. Really good answer. When they are insider pressure groups, they have an in with the government. Outside groups have to use more extreme tactics, and that's true. So Extinction Rebellion, blocking bridges and things like that was effective because if one of their aims is to raise awareness, they certainly did that. Even if they might have annoyed some people, they made public debate happen. The government, so Dennis said the government don't want to set a precedence, and they don't so they might feel a bit like if they just kind of cater all the time, and there's issues, right? So do pressure groups enhance democracy because they support minority interests, but then does that undermine it because democracy is majoritarian? So do minority rights take over majority rights? So that's really good. So
There was
you'll
a
see
good,
go on, sorry.
I was going to say there was a good one earlier about relationship with parties as well, because you get this idea of sort of potential insiders, don't you? Like Votes at 16 have got a good relationship with Labour and other opposition parties, and so if there's a change of government in the future, then they might become an insider group in that scenario. So having a good relationship with political parties can be useful.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, brilliant answers. You can see I put only 2 down, so you guys smashed it. So well done, everybody.
Very good.
Thank you. Yeah, let's check out the next one. Okay. So this one's thinking more so about the AO2, the analysis. So are we able to make connections between different ideas? So let's see what the kind of criteria is that we're looking at, or the argument, sorry. All right, so the argument is that pressure groups enhance democracy. So everything around the circle are potential reasons, or potential ways that pressure groups can improve democracy. So let's see, whatever the spinner kind of connects onto, we need to think about how can we link that together. So pressure groups enhance democracy because they do what, and then how can we connect it? So let's see what comes up then.
Where will it stop?
Yeah.
The jeopardy.
The suspense. Okay, perfect. So the argument is pressure groups enhance democracy because they increase participation. So what can we see? How can they increase participation? How is that good for democracy? So put down any ideas you have in the chat. So why is participation good for democracy? And we can see there, like, even though that element of talking about things like participation has been removed from the advanced information, it still is relevant. So just bearing that in mind, the advanced information isn't to reduce the things that we learn. It's just about to focus more for what we're revising. So it all is still quite important. So why is participation good for democracy, and how can pressure groups improve it? Okay, so Dennis has said it allows for more views of the public to be heard by the government. Fantastic, very true. New Trilogy Analysis Project said they enhance democracy by enabling people to participate in protests. An example of being BLM use of grassroots strategies in 2020. I love that every time you say an answer, you're using an example, which is really phenomenal. It's a really strong way to kind of write this down. So yeah, very true. So we see actually that people are participating and being involved and caring about democracy. If you're going out and protesting, it's because you have faith in the system. You have faith that by protesting, the government or someone's going to kind of listen to you, and that there can be change. So you're not being apathetic, you're participating. It's really important. Josh said people can get involved with politics on issues they care about, and the power is somewhat removed from Westminster through that. That's really true. So it removes the centrality of Westminster. So instead of politics being something that happens to people, people are involved in politics, and that is really important for a healthy democracy. And our participations at all times, not just at elections. So fantastic, yeah. So we can see that they definitely help people get involved. They give people an avenue to get involved as well. So let's see where the connection spinner lands for the next one.
All of these could be useful to explore. We're only going to look at 2 of them tonight, but it'd be worth thinking about all of them, wouldn't it, in your own time?
And you can plan answers around this. When you're finished, you can pause and kind of screenshot it and write it out in your books. It's quite a useful way to revise, just trying to recall things rather than just reading over things. Okay, so representation. So how can pressure groups enhance democracy through representation? I think this is a good example of one where you can go either way. So this is a nice one for a good paragraph, actually, because you have your argument and your counter within it. So if you want to add a counter, actually, and say they don't just enhance democracy, that's good too.
Or you can save that for the next activity if you'd rather, but either's fine.
Sorry.
No, it's fine, because they could take it. They could go a different way on the next activity, but they could choose to.
Yeah, it could. Yeah. So how can pressure groups improve representation? So even thinking about the pitfalls of Parliament, actually, is Parliament even that representative? How can pressure groups right that wrong in that sense? Okay, Josh said government has to consider different groups of society that might be underrepresented in Parliament, such as ethnic minorities. Okay, so that's a good one for maybe Parliament is actually fairly effective in that. So how can it be that pressure groups can improve representation?
So, I mean, through what Joss's point, I suppose, is that it's kind of it's an element of pluralism, isn't it? It's part of our pluralistic democracy that different groups exist and kind of make Parliament or the government listen to them in that sense. But yeah.
But yeah, that's very true, and I think that that's actually the stronger argument that Parliament kind of can be quite effective. So at times, however, pressure groups may limit democracy by enabling the spread of extremist ideals. The EDL is arguably an example, with it helping to enable extreme organizations such as UKIP, BNP, or yeah, exactly, right. So, okay, true. Actually, a lot of the time we can see that pressure groups can legitimize voices of groups who advocate for hate speech, right, which can be quite bad. And they do. Okay, you're saying all the arguments that say it undermines democracy.
Should we see if we've got one more on the enhanced democracy thing, as we've got that as our central thing? Should we see if anyone's got another one of those? Because Megan's made a really good point there, but save it for a minute.
Save it for just copy and paste it in like 2 seconds. Sorry, guys.
It's all right.
So yeah, basically, how can they enhance democracy? So I think the example is quite powerful. Well, there's 2. You can think about the Fawcett Society, for example. So women are underrepresented in Parliament. It's about, I think, 32% of MPs are female. So they're considering the population's over 50. It's kind of a bit confusing why it's so low. It's not confusing. We know exactly why, but effectively, the Fawcett Society can help to elevate the voice of women in society by representing their interests. You also have Stonewall and Outrage, who can advocate for LGBT rights. So as a minority group, Parliament doesn't have to necessarily address their needs. because they won't make or break their electoral success. But what pressure groups like Outrage and Stonewall do is they make it so that LGBT issues are at the forefront of people's minds when they're voting. So people might not be members of the LGBT community, but because they're being educated by someone like Outrage, they can see that LGBT rights are human rights issues. So it can be useful in that sense. Okay. So on to you, Duncan, for the next bit.
Okay, so I think you might have already come close to giving me 3 of these, but can you give me 3 ways that pressure groups could potentially harm democracy or certainly not enhance it? So we're looking for kind of the flip side of the argument. It doesn't have to be in relation to representation, but that could certainly be one way that you could go, but you could consider other ways that it might do this as well. Okay, see how you go.
Like the variety of music.
Yeah, have you got your bongos handy?
Of course.
I'll count you in.
Perfect timing. Yeah, good one from Megan there.
Yeah. 30 seconds goes very quickly, doesn't it? We had lots of good answers, really, in relation to the previous question, but Megan's come up with a good one there. They're unaccountable to the electorate. Absolutely, there's no accountability, really, with pressure groups. There might be some internal accountability with some of them, but as I think it was Megan again pointed out earlier, a lot of groups have limited internal democracy, so they may not even be accountable to their own members. New Right argued trade union strikes undermine democratic state. Yeah, absolutely. So some New Right thinkers talked about pressure groups being kind of snakes that are was that I can't remember the precise serpents.
Democracy.
Absolutely, serpents that strangle democracy. Pressure groups getting media attention can harm the neutrality of organisations. BBC, maybe. Yeah. Expertise helps to gatekeep specific issues and specific protests meant for minority rights may in fact turn people against the idea. Okay, yeah, and so there could be, sometimes it might be a negative impact on a particular group or a particular area. The coverage might not be positive. There was also points that people made before about extremist groups, and what about which groups get heard? Before I click on my answers, which groups are more likely to get a good hearing from the government? In a sort of ideal pluralistic democracy, the idea is the government will listen to all the different voices and all the different groups and make a sound judgment. Joss says the most violent, but I don't know whether that's necessarily true. I suppose they will get heard they'll get heard in terms of they'll get coverage and people notice it. The most violent and extreme will be the ones that people notice, but will they be the ones that the government responds to or reacts to? I think Megan, the ones with the most money and most resources may well be the right answer there, mightn't it? In terms of who actually has a big influence on the government, it's likely to be the kind of groups that represent the elite in society rather than necessarily are representative more broadly. So there are a few ways we could talk about this. Amplifies voices of unrepresented minorities. Absolutely, Joss, that might include kind of extreme groups, violent groups, but doesn't have to be. It could be perfectly legitimate groups, but just groups that aren't particularly representative, and they may get kind of unrepresentatively amplified. This issue about elitism, as it's kind of the opposite of pluralism when we think about pressure group influence. The richest and highly connected groups probably have the most influence, the whole sort of old school type thing. And groups are often internally undemocratic, which Megan made that point earlier. So loads of really good points there. Well done. We've got one last activity, which is my favourite one. It's always just a bit of fun, really, to finish, to send you off after all your very hard work. Well done. So this is an activity called Word Smash. It's like Answer Smash on Richard Osman's House of Games. The example on the screen, you've got an elephant, you've got Antarctica, which is what the clue is for, and you smash them together to make Elephantarctica. So the end of the first bit is the start of the second bit. If you've been on these with us before. You've probably seen one of these. So let's see if you can get these. Just 3 of them. So we've got a federation of 48 affiliated workers' interest groups. So there's an image there, which you may recognise. Interestingly, we've kind of got pressure groups on both sides here. They won't all be they won't all be like this, but there's a sort of a pressure group element to the first image as well. But do we know what the big federation in UK of? Oh, well done, Megan. Fair Trade Union and one more word. TUC, the Trade Union Congress. Fair Trade and Trade Union Congress. Fair Trade Union Congress. Well done. Very good. Okay. An organisation opposed to fox hunting and hare coursing, etc. Now, does anyone recognise
that's a dated reference there?
1980s pop group on the left hand side? These days, people know music from all times, don't they? There's been a sort of shift because of people streaming and Spotify and Apple Music and stuff. People can said no, don't recognise it. You'd know some of their famous songs if you were. I won't start singing. You'll be relieved to know. So I promise I won't start singing. Well, does anyone recognise what the pressure group then is? If you don't recognise what the pop group is, they may well have been working as a waitress in a cocktail bar. I'm just trying to. You may just see if anyone recognises the song without me singing it. Okay, no one know the group? Organisation opposed to fox hunting, hare coursing, cockfighting, other activities of that sort that may be termed.
Oh, Megan got the band. I think that's a.
Oh, well done, Megan. Yeah, that's saved me from singing. It was Human League. No, it wasn't Blur. No, it was Human League. Human League, and then we've got the group. I'll have to give it. It is League Against Cruel Sport. So it's Human League Against Cruel Sport. Okay, I don't know whether I'm nervous or excited about the last one. Let's see how we go. So it's a global human rights organisation, and then who knows what's going on the left hand side. My only clue for what's going on the left hand side is that it's not Burnley or Aston Villa, which are teams that also wear the same colours. So it's about as much as I know about football, incidentally. But it's okay. Any ideas? You will know the Global Human Rights Organisation. I can promise you that.
Mm.
And I'm sure someone of all the people watching recognises the football team. There's bound to be someone who knows more about football than me on here, because that's basically everyone. So I thought maybe this one would get got quick. Am I going to have to reveal it? Okay. You'll kick yourselves. It was West Amnesty International. The football team was West Ham. The pressure group was Amnesty International. West Amnesty International. Okay. I do love a bit of word smash. We might try it again next time. Okay, I'm going to go back to the studio. Okay. There's some really good answers in there, weren't there, this evening, Kira? Some really good answers in the live chat window. We are going to keep going with topics that are in the advanced information. So there'll be more of that next week. Keep an eye on it. If you want to find out about it, make sure you click the thumbs up next to the video. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Tutor to You on YouTube, and then you'll find out when we're next going live. You can also find all the information down at tutortoyou.net/live, which is always worth doing. And all the previous ones we've done are on there, and there are a lot now. And you can download the PowerPoints and all that kind of thing, which can be very useful. There's loads of resources on tutordo.net as well in the politics section. And if you want to come and see us live, we're going around the country. We will be. We're on tour, so if you want to, we'll do some word smash. We'll do it. We'll do some word smash live. Come and join us on our Grade Booster Cinema workshops, starting at the end of this month, and before and after Easter, we'll be coming to a cinema near you. Okay, great stuff. See you next time. Okay, bye, folks. Bye.